So some of the things that we look at with business owners, and this really comes back to the franchise owners. We've had some situations in the past. The best example I give with franchise owners when it comes to brand protection. Your income is tied to that brand. Whether the CEO gets caught doing something he's not supposed to, and whether or not another franchisee in Wisconsin, for example, went out and, the best example I always give on that one, unfortunately, is the Jack in the Box situation with E. coli. Years ago, when E. coli came out, it was in Wisconsin, but I live in Idaho, and I can tell you the franchisee owners of Jack in the Boxes in Idaho were dramatically affected by the income coming in, even though it didn't occur, anywhere close to that to Idaho. They were still financially hit by that. And you see that a lot with franchises. I love franchises. I think they're the most successful. The way you talk about mom and pops being able to go out and create financial independent wealth and security for themselves and their family, I think franchises are fantastic. But you do take some additional risk for that as well. You're tied to that franchisor. You're tied to that brand. And brand damage today is one of the biggest risks business owners take. We live and breathe on Yelp. We live and breathe on Google reviews. We do all these things. And I call it the double negative, right? So let's say you got hit with a foodborne illness. Now you can buy foodborne illness in traditional insurance carriers, but it's gonna be limited to what your coverages are for. But also the PR is going to be limited. And what I mean by public relations, you got to go out and rebuild now your reputation in the community. And again, this could be affected you directly or indirectly. Where's the money going to come from? You now have a compressed growth revenue going on because less customers coming through the door and your expenses are going up. Where's the money going to come from? You're going to go down to the bank and ask them for more money? That's not going to happen. So again, these 831B plans handle a lot of different issues. The one big issue right now is supply chain risk, right? I mean, there's this air bubble running through all these supply chains risks now because of the shutdowns. Where's supply chain interruption going to come from? What if you have to now go buy a product that's going to cost you more money to keep your doors open? Where's that money going to come from? Are you going to raise your prices? These are all things that business owners, unfortunately, until you're there, you don't think about, because God knows you already got plenty to think about now. And so one of the things that we really talk about here is these types of things. And political risk obviously was huge last year. I mean, when municipalities are forcing you to shut down, the dental community alone was dramatically affected by political risk. And that's one thing. Then we talked about supply chain, brand protection, dispute resolution. Dispute resolution is legal. And I think right now, we've not even hit the tip of the iceberg with lawsuits coming. It's going to be interesting. This stuff that, unfortunately, I'm a geek when it comes to risk management. I read a lot of periodicals, almost maybe too much. But
and Van, this is Tom. Sorry to interrupt real quick on that,
good.
but do you see this as being the lawsuits coming from kind of the small to mid-sized business community going toward like city and state governments, or forced shutdowns, or where do you see this happening? Customers of the businesses? I'm trying to.
Well, that's okay. So unfortunately, we still don't have the liability yet from Congress, right? So whether or not did grandma get COVID when she went to McDonald's or to that franchisee, I don't know what the proof of that is, but it certainly won't be good. And then you got to decide, then the insurer, the insurance carriers, is that a right to defend? Does that fall under the right to defend clause of the general liability policies that they're now being sued? That's one thing. Now you got the employees. Can the employees now sue the employer because they contracted COVID and they can't hear now out of an ear, or they got ongoing respiratory issues? I mean, does that fall under work comp, disability? And can they still allow you to sue the insurer? The other one is, do you have investors, right? So if they invested in your business and now you didn't have pandemic coverage under your policy, now and you were responsible for the overall business, have you just opened yourself up to being sued by your investors? Because you should have seen that coming. That's the directors and officers, and I mean all the other things that go into that play. And then I think, the lawsuits, far as suing municipalities and so forth, I think that's probably a no. It might be, they may try, but I think that's not going to go anywhere. But it's these individual civil lawsuits that you potentially be looking at, and that's where dispute resolution comes in. I think we're in an extremely litigious society, and again, if you have to defend yourself, you got to pull cash flow out of the business. And if the cash flow is not, if you got economic downturn, you got COVID-19, you got all these other things happening, where's that money going to come from? And that's really that's why the 831B exists, right? I mean, that's why the tax code exists, is to manage risk more effectively. Again, big companies have been doing this for a long time. It was extremely expensive to get into. It didn't make any sense for small to middle market business owners. At SRA, when I started this program, I wanted to make sure any client out there that had these risks, that was a risk taker, that was entrepreneurial minded, all those things, that they could do our program. And so we were very mindful of fees and startup costs and all those things. The other ones, real quick, professional liability, employer liability interruption. That's a big one. That's wrongful terminations. That's sexual harassment, age discrimination. Again, you have sublimits in your traditional business operating policy, a BOP policy under a franchise market, but it's very limited. Typically, it's about $25,000 of business interruption, or excuse me, employer liability interruption. We actually have an endorsement on ours too, because if you're being sued by an employee for whatever reason, wrongful term, whatever, unfortunately, a lot of times in your area, that makes local news. So we also have an endorsement on there for that specific kind of stuff where, it's going to create a PR balance sheet where you can go out and hire a PR firm, or at least get out in front of it enough to where you can do more marketing and all that kind of stuff. And key employee accident critical illness. That's a great one especially for key employees. They become disabled. They become, unfortunately, unexpected death, and you've been relying on them for your business. That creates an issue to you could take a big time. Could you imagine if you had a general manager and you had 5 franchises and something happened to that person? How's that going to affect your cash flow of your business all of a sudden? So these are just, and then the audit protection is good too. It covers you for work comp audits, sales tax audits, IRS audits, or any audit that has come from a government agency or from an insurance company would cover that. Now, those are additional expenses, again, that you can incur that will take away from your cash flow of your business. And of course, we're dealing with some business owners that have taken higher deductibles now with the hardening of the traditional markets. They're taking on more risk. We have deductible reimbursement as well. And then there's warranty services contracts, protection plans, and then we're dealing with contract default as well. If I hire general contractor or subcontractors to do some work for me, they go out of business. Now I'm responsible for that ultimately. That's what contractor default is. So those are just a real quick clip version of the self-insured risk of business owners. And I guess, anytime we talk to business owners, they can always tell us there's more risk out there for them as well.